Hi guys, welcome aboard. Thanks for tuning in today. We're going to be going over macros, what the hell they are, where you can find them, and then we're going to break down how to find your own macros for a given goal, whether it's muscle gain or weight loss or maintenance. So let's dive into things. Here we go. What are macros? So macros, aka macronutrients, they are the nutrients that your body needs in large quantities, not to be mistaken from minerals and vitamins, which are much smaller amounts. They are broken down into protein, fats, and carbohydrates. So they provide the raw material for tissue repair, energy production, hormone regulation, and cellular function. If you can picture your body being a car, macronutrients are what keeps you going, what repairs the parts of the car, and builds up the car. So breaking it down, like I said, protein, fats, carbs. Proteins, they supply amino acids necessary for building and repairing muscle tissue and supporting immune health. Picture these as the raw materials being bolts, metal, nuts. Then if any damage occurs to the vehicle, they are the repair parts to sustain the frame if there's any rust or anything that happens like that. Fats, they regulate hormone production, support the nervous system, and they can be used as fuel sometimes. So picture this as oil. So oil burns a lot slower than fuel or gas, and it keeps the engine running smoothly. So it keeps all the inner workings of the car just running very efficiently. Carbohydrates, these are broken down into glucose and is the preferred fuel source of high intensity exercise as well as brain function. So this is, if you're looking at like premium gas, it's very high octane fuel and preferred fuel source of a vehicle. Protein overview. Protein's made up of amino acids. Once you break down protein, this is what you get. Little pieces called amino acids. I'm sure you've heard of, BCAAs, branched chain amino acids. That's what they are. This is protein. It is what repairs and builds skeletal tissue. Anytime you're training, every rep that you do, if you're pushing or grunting or doing any type of working out, that is what causes muscle damage. And we need amino acids in protein to adequately repair and then build up muscle tissue. So they also act as catalysts for every chemical reaction, digestion, producing energy, literally anything that happens in the body, almost everything. Protein is at the start of it. It is also, where a lot of hormones come from. So insulin, this is shuttling glucose inside of cells. Glucagon is what shuttles glucose outside of cells, and then GH, growth hormone, talking about promoting growth of muscle tissue. This all starts from protein-based hormones. Antibodies, those are also proteins. So if we're thinking of immune health, anytime you get sick, the white blood cells, those are proteins. So without proteins, immune system, not good. Proteins provide structure outside of skeletal tissue. So if we're thinking of our earlobes, our noses, elastin, skin, tendons, ligaments, collagen, keratin, all that is based off of protein. Continuing on protein, that's kind of the nitty gritty of it. Protein is not stored. So unlike carbs and fats, we need protein every day. It is essential. So as far as the building material, if we're thinking metabolism, constantly building, constantly breaking down. So we need protein in the system to continue that building up process. So if we're looking at our necessary intake for the day, sedentary adults, we're looking at 0.8 grams per kg of body weight. Athletes, 1.2 to 2.2 kgs of body weight. And then if we're in a deficit, we would like to be on the higher end of that to promote keeping the fat-free mass. So if we're in a deficit, we're going to be losing energy. So we want to promote keeping our lean muscle tissue, bone density, stuff like that. So we're going to be in the higher range right here if we're in a deficit. But good rule of thumb, 1 gram per pound of desired body weight. So 2.2 kgs is about 1 pound. So if we do 1 gram per pound, if you're looking to be 185, you want 185 grams of protein daily, okay? Energy that comes from protein, we're getting 4 calories for every gram, and it should make up 10 to 35% of your daily intake. Outside of that, again, if we are in specific diets or in deficits, it might be on the higher end of things, but we never want to drop down below 9% just based off of needs daily, Protein sources, you can go over this on your own, but A lot. Greek yogurt, sausage, beef, turkey, oats. It can be found everywhere if we're looking around. So a lot of animal products, nuts, seeds, plant products, and this is what we're looking for: 25 to 40 grams per meal every 3 to 4 hours. So that allows your body to be the most optimal as far as muscle protein synthesis. That is the ability to, recover and grow muscle tissue effectively. Anything below this range, you're not really triggering that MPS, muscle protein synthesis. Anything outside of this range, it's not really being absorbed effectively, and most likely you're going to be farting it out, pooping it out, stuff like that. So I'm sure you've had, maybe a bunch of protein shakes or a large meal, and you kind of got the protein farts afterwards. That is because it's not being digested properly. So this is going to be that sweet spot, 25 to 40 grams. And then based off of your total protein needs for the day, just, spreading out your meals accordingly. Moving on to fats. So we got hormone regulation, cellular structure, and vitamins absorption. So raw materials for key hormones like testosterone, estrogen, and cortisol. You are familiar with those. Cellular structure. So fats make up the phospholipid bilayer. What is that? That is a small membrane around the outside of every cell, and that kind of coordinates what gets let in and what gets put out. So on the outside, if the fat allows for these vitamins right here, so fat enables absorption of fat-soluble vitamins, these come through the phospholipid bilayer. So there's a method of communication between cells, and that derives from fat. So if we do not have fats, a lot less communication going on within the body, and our brain is also 60% of fat. So it's a necessity, right? Also, those vitamins allow for bone health, immunity, antioxidant defense. They're needed. Fats don't make you fat. Consistent excess energy intake makes you fat. Fats continued. They provide long-lasting energy with low-intensity activity, like what we were talking about as far as the oil, right? Very slow burn. They are not needed in strength training, but if you were going for a very light jog or walking all day, you'd be using fat as a primary fuel source. But they provide a very slow burn. It's not immediate high-octane type of energy, but very slow burning. So sedentary adults, 0.8 to 1 kg body weight, athletes 8 to 1.5 grams per kg, and then in a deficit, kind of moving back into that sedentary adult range. Now, this is a relatively high range for us because it's dependent upon, the type of athlete that you are looking to be. If you're a high endurance marathon runner or, ultra marathon, triathlon, something that is moderate intensity for a long duration, that's where you're going to be on the higher range right here of your fats, because that'll be the primary fuel source for your chosen activity. But strength training individuals and just, the average layperson going to the gym is going to hover, right about 1.2 perhaps. Would be a good rule of thumb for you. So 0.4 grams per pound of desired body weight if you are looking to find the macros that work well for you. And fats are going to be, again, highly course dependent upon how many protein you are having, as well as carbohydrates in your diet, and then this just adjusts accordingly based off of that. 1 gram of fat equals 9 calories, so just noticing that difference between protein being 4, 9 being very calorically dense, right? So it's nearly or more than double the energy found in protein as well as carbohydrates. So very high output as far as energy, but not the preferred fuel source, so it is mainly stored. Going to be 20 to 35% of your daily intake. Fat sources, avocados, nuts, oils. Sure you heard of omega-6s, omega-3s. These are found in cold water fishes. Nuts, butter, ghee. We can also find fats in fried foods and heavily processed foods, so we definitely want to be mindful of our intake. That's where you're going to find the saturated fats and the trans fats over here, which, again, we want to keep relatively low and avoid. But, the healthy fats, quote unquote, this is all good right here to be in that 10 to 35%. We want to minimize this to less than 10% of our intake. But that's where our fun foods are, right? Good rule of thumb, no pun intended, about a thumb-sized portion of fat with every meal. So if you're just kind of eyeballing it and don't have a scale, A thumb would be maybe 2 slices of avocado, maybe 8 or 10 nuts or almonds on your plate as a serving. That would be a good portion of fat for your meal. Carbs overview. Carbs are broken down into glucose, the preferred fuel source for both brain and working muscles. Storage. Excess glucose is stored as glycogen in the liver and muscle. So there's about 50 grams of glucose that can be stored in the adult liver. So not too much. The rest is going to be stored in your skeletal muscle, right? So if you're doing repeated bouts of high intensity exercise, you kind of burn through that. And I'm sure hitting the wall is something that often gets thrown around. That's when you have depleted your glucose sources within your body, within your muscle tissue and everything. So that's why, you have a snack mid-workout or you have a Gatorade that fuels up those glucose storages. This way we can use it again. Protein sparing. When there's sufficient carbohydrates in the body, protein is used for building instead of fuel. So when we're talking, ketones, ketosis, very low carb intake diets, that's when we start using other fuel sources, i.e. protein, breaking those down, and through it's a method called gluconeogenesis, which creates glucose from non-glucose substrates. So that would be through protein. But when we have enough carbs in the system, we are using protein for what protein is supposed to be used for. That is building and repair. So this does an excellent job as far as sparing the protein that we do have in our body. Fiber and satiety. So complex carbohydrates provide fiber. We'll touch base on that a little bit later. It's important for digestion, regulating blood sugar, promoting satiety, and supporting gut health. Like I said, we'll touch on that in a little bit. But if you have seen Austin Powers, Fat Bastard, carbs are the enemy. There's a whole societal kind of combative nature towards carbohydrates. Carbs are not the enemy. You need them. That is what your body is fueled off of. That's what your brain loves to use as a fuel source. So they are not the enemy. Carbs provide immediate fuel for high-intensity activity. So anytime you are doing any strength training, doing a run, a sprint, a broad jump, anything like that kind of takes your breath away and you're huffing and puffing, that'll be carbs as the fuel source. It's burning them up quickly. It's putting them right to use. So 3 to 5 grams per kg for sedentary adults, not too much because they're not exerting themselves. 4 to 7, all the way up to 6 to 10. So 4 to 10 really is the range, nearly double of that of the sedentary adults, just because we are training, we are strength training, we are putting these muscles to use. And then in a deficit, we're going to be a little bit lower, just based off of keeping the protein higher to maximize the muscle tissue, right? Good rule of thumb, 2 to 3 grams per pound of desired body weight. So adjust this based off of activity level, if we're in this upper echelon or in the smaller range down here, but just something to be mindful of right here. 1 gram of carbohydrates equals 4 calories, equal that to protein, and half of the fat stores. So again, a little bit less energy output overall in comparison to fat, but much easier to break down and use as an immediate fuel source as opposed to the fats. And this is taking up 45 to 65% of your daily intake. So it's going to be the vast majority of what is being put into your body and what your body likes to thrive off of. Carb sources. We got berries, we got fruits, we got bread, oats, quinoa. And then we got the fun foods over here. So we got pretzels, crackers, candy. That is going to be, sugars, quickly digested into glucose, quickly put to use, but also a rapid blood sugar spike, which leads us into fiber and the importance of that. But if we are looking for portions, it's 1 to 2 cupped hands with every meal. So if you have your thumb of fat, you got 30 grams of protein, whatever that might be, whatever your fuel source is. Cup your hands together, and that'll be your rice on the side of your couscous or your berries. So that'll be your portion size for your plate. So diving into fiber now. It's a type of carbohydrate that the body cannot fully digest or absorb. It remains relatively intact through your digestion and provides unique benefits. This is broken up into 2 different categories. There's soluble fiber and then insoluble fiber. Soluble fiber, it is digested a little bit, But when it does, it secretes like this, almost like gum, um, like gel almost in the stomach, and it slows down digestion, and that lowers LDL cholesterol, so the bad cholesterol, low density lipoproteins, and it also doesn't really release the blood sugar into the bloodstream quite as rapidly. So it's kind of in small doses, so you're not getting that immediate spike right off the rip. Kind of paces it out, and that's where that satiety is. Keeps you fuller for longer, slows digestion, regulates blood sugar. So it's not shooting all of the glucose immediately into your bloodstream. Now we have insoluble fiber. So if you ever thought of, if you have corn for dinner, then when you pass it, there's that same corn. So this is the insoluble fiber. So those with the husks on the food, it doesn't really get digested, and it keeps the bowel movements regular. So it just pushes everything apart. I saw this phrase, I think it's right here. Soluble fiber acts as a sponge. Insoluble fiber acts as a broom. So if we're going back to this is a sponge holding onto things, slowing digestion. This is just sweeping you out, cleaning you out, providing bowel movements regularly. So good stuff. Fiber sources broken down right here. Insoluble, like what I was talking about with the husks, celery, unblanched broccoli, carrots have the outside going on. We got the skins on the pecans, potatoes with the skin, whole wheat products. Not white rice or anything like that. When it's got the whole husk on it, so it's sweeping you out. And then we have the soluble, somewhat digested lentils, apples, citrus fruits, and pears. Those are going to be your soluble fiber sources. Let's put it together now. So many foods have multiple macronutrients within them. Having a diet that is rich in variety an excellent way to ensure you are covering all of your bases. So that would be, keto, we're totally taking out one entire macronutrient, like demonizing carbs, and then we're relying as fat as a fuel source, less efficient. It doesn't really give an opportunity for protein to do what it does. Paleo, again, we're taking out certain food sources. Carnivore, Atkins, the no.mad diet, gallon of milk a day, which is extremely rich in fats and protein. Again, demonizing carbs to some extent. So we got to have, a nice, rich balance of everything. Eating the rainbow, as they say, but giving your body a good opportunity to have some variety from a micro and macronutrient standpoint. Now we're going to find our macros. So making it work here for us, we're going to use myself as a case study. We're going to break down how many proteins I need, carbohydrates, and fats. So this is something that you can do on yourself and just plug in the numbers for what you want to do accordingly. So first off, we are setting the goal. If I want to lose body fat, we need to make it a SMART goal. So specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. So we have 12 pounds in 2 months. So that would be 12 pounds in 8 weeks. That is 1.5 pounds of body fat lost per week. So if 3,500 calories is 1 pound of mass, 1.5 pounds a week is 5,250 calorie deficit per week. Divided by 7 days, I'm going to be in a 750 calorie diet for the next 8 weeks. Easy peasy. So now we're going to figure out our total daily energy expenditure. You can hop on tdeecalculator.net. Age, weight, height, activity level. This will give you a rough estimate. If you know your body fat percentage, you can plug that in right here. And that'll give you your maintenance calories. So this is about where I'm at currently. And then you're going to just subtract that daily caloric deficit of the 750 that we were talking about over here. And this is what we are going to be at for our total daily caloric intake in order to meet that deficit, in order to lose those 12 pounds in 2 months. Next, we're going to set the protein macronutrient target. So going back to that range, 1.6 to 2.2. Cool. Desired body weight. I want to lose 12 pounds, 192. That is my goal weight. 2.2 for kg, and then 2.2 for grams. So it's going to be essentially the same number, but we're just going to divide it right here for sake of being able to know what we're doing. 192 pound, 2.2 is conversion to kilogram, 87.7. Times that by the protein range. This is going to be my protein target for the day. And then we're going to multiply that by the calories that come in protein. That's how many calories we're having from protein. Divide that by the total daily calories, 30%. Boom. lands us right in that range for total daily calories from protein, 30%. Good, good. Let's go down one. Fat, target, we're gonna do the same thing. 0.4 grams, that was the rule of thumb that we were working with, down to our pounds, down to kilograms. Bum, bum, bum. 1 gram of kg, so we got it right here, 87, that's it. Multiply that by 9, because that's how many calories come from fat. 785 divided by 2540, 30%. But wait a second, that puts us outside of our range for carbohydrates, right? So now we just got to go back and adjust, like what we were talking about before. Fat is very case dependent upon the individual and what they want to do for their exercise needs. So we're going to go back there and just adjust accordingly. So if we want 4 grams because we're going to be in a deficit, that would put us at 329 times our kg, right? So 329 grams times 4 for carbs, that is the amount of calories that we have. Divide that by the daily calories, 52%. So now we need to adjust the fat pattern. So we got 30% for protein, 52 for carb, leaves us at 18 for fat. This many calories coming from fat, then this will be the amount of grams from fat. So at the end of the day, that leaves us on the higher range of proteins, kind of moderate amount of carbs, and the low end of fats. Not the end of the world if you slightly fall out of that range. We just don't want to get below 10% or have it making up 36, 38, 40% of your daily caloric intake, because then the other macronutrients would suffer. So all good right there. Fits within that pie chart. This will be what our macros are for the day. So now diving in a little bit deeper, just figuring out something that works well for your schedule, well for your lifestyle, how many meals you want to have, how many snacks you want to have. I want 2 snacks, I want 3 meals. So if we divide daily calories, 3 meals, this will be what I should be having at about each meal, give or take. What about the snacks? I want 2 200-calorie snacks. That's pretty easy as far as like having bars or having nuts or fruits on board. 200 calories is pretty moderate. Divide this, 400 calories worth of snacks, divided by 3, so 713. And now we're like really just getting in the nitty gritty now, like how many protein should I have at each meal, yada yada. This is kind of making my head spin. Have pen and paper out, trying to do all this math. However, you can hop on this right here. I'm sure you are familiar with ChatGPT. You don't need the pen and paper yourself. In Crunch Numbers, apps are your friend. So once you have found those macronutrients that work for you, you have your calories from the TDEE calculator, as well as the deficit that we're looking for. Just be very specific with the prompt in order for this to spit you back a meal plan that's sufficient for you. You can, 7-day meal plan, you can ask for, 5 meals or 5 different meal options for, 3 meals and your snacks and everything. And within 5 seconds, it'll spit this right back out at you. So you have your breakfast, everything's measured out in grams, and this is sure to hit your macros, hit your calorie goals, and, give you some variety within that. And you can pick and choose which recipes that you do want to run with. So that's cool. At the end of the day, food is food. There's no good or bad food. There are some that are going to be a little bit more rich, macronutrient dense, and some not so much. So obviously a fruit salad with some natural honey and maybe some feta cheese up on top of it, that's going to be very rich in antioxidants and some carbs, get some protein in there. Or you can have a bag of Pringles. One is not better than the other. It's just dependent upon your goals and how you are reaching those micro nutrient goals, right? So eat for your goals, but also enjoy what you eat. And they don't have to be separate. So finding recipes that work well for you, but also check all the boxes for what you need to get into your system on the daily is the way to be. And then being within the 80-20 rule. You don't need to be in prohibition or abstinence of the quote-unquote bad foods, because there are no bad foods, but just, primarily eating whole foods and seeking out those nutrient-dense meals, and then still having your fun foods over here for 20% of your total daily caloric intake. Yep. And this last little bit right here, once you understand macros, eating will never be the same again. I wish I can rewind and go back to the ignorance is bliss, where you can look at food and just see it as what it is. See it as food. But once you understand macros, you will be dissecting every plate moving forward as this is carb, this is protein. This is fat right here. So that's for the better. Eat for your needs and enjoy what you eat. Thanks for tuning in.